Hi, Chris.
Hi, Hugh.
Good to see you.
And you too. I'm very well, thank you. Yeah. How
Good.
about you?
Yeah. We were talking before, and then I thought that it would be really interesting to make a sort of video or a podcast about how you managed to leverage in AI into every little bit of your product, StratNavApp. I thought it was inspiring. It certainly inspired me. But also, I think, I mean, my feeling is that we will be leveraging AI into lots of product offerings, and people don't quite know how. And you kind of gone on that journey, and you've done it. You started with a little bit, and now you've put it in a lot. And I think it changes your product and makes it better. So I thought, if we share that, that might be interesting and inspiring to other people.
Perfect. It's given me a chance to sit back and reflect on the journey as well, which has been quite interesting to reflect the steps we've gone through and the sort of lessons that we've learned.
About 2 years, I think. Is that right?
Well, I mean, the story actually starts a little bit before that, because before Gen AI, of course, we had we had other kinds of AI, and AI was always something that was happening in the background. So we had in our product from before Gen AI, we had machine learning working in the background, and in fact we still do. The Gen AI has come along and it's built on top of the machine learning rather than replaced it, because there are some problems. Gen AI is a tool. You don't need to use it for everything. It's an expensive tool in some ways, and it has a latency. It takes a while, even if it's only seconds. It's still seconds that it takes to come back with an answer. And so for some types of tasks, machine learning remains cheaper, faster, and better. So we still have actually quite a lot of
So
machine learning in the
what's
product.
the ML part of StratNavApp?
So we use ML for categorizing different types of information, which then allows the tool to express relationships between those bits of
Right.
information based on the categorization.
Okay, but and where did you get your corpus of training data, or was that freely available?
So the training data comes from the product itself. We can look at, without using the information or showing the information to anyone else, we can look at when other people have talked about these kind of things, this is how they've related them together. So a great example is, at the time we were doing it, of course, Brexit was a big thing. And of course, lots of people would mention Brexit. And so using machine learning, you could say, well, know where aspects of Brexit have fitted into the framework within StratNavApp when other people have referenced it. So, just to keep it really simple, when someone talks about Brexit, they're probably talking about the impact on their business of a political decision. They're probably not setting a strategic goal. Just to keep it really simple.
So there's a risk, probably a risk.
So they might see it as a risk. They might see it as an opportunity. And of course, the machine learning can look at that and say, when you say Brexit and you mention increasing in tariffs, you might say that's a threat. When you say Brexit and you mention protection of your industry, you might be seeing that as an opportunity. I probably personally wouldn't, but you might be seeing it as an opportunity to strengthen your position in a certain industry.
Well, I'm sure there are plenty of areas where Brexit is an opportunity, although anyway.
Well, I think that's one of those things that's been hotly debated on social media. Some people clearly think so, other people clearly think not.
But let's not go
And
there.
the tool and the machine learning within the tool, of course, isn't going to have a political view. It's just going to analyze what you're saying and try and extract the relationships in a way that would be useful for your strategic analysis.
Okay. All right. So that's the ML. But then about 2 years ago, we were working on the AI adoption playbook, and we were doing some webinars, and I was using something that you thought, oh, I can use that.
Yeah. No, that's right. So when we were doing the webinars and I thought we had a great mix in that playbook, because we looked at AI from a number of different angles. So if you kind of think back, we were working with Priscilla, and Priscilla had some really great insights about the sort of personal productivity aspect of things, which were really useful. And you had a lot of stuff, which we'll get to where we're going, about automation opportunities and how you could use it. And of course, I was trying to find the sort of strategic angle on it. But one of the tools that you brought to my attention was a little tool called Chatbase. I mean, you kind of showed it to me, and I thought, well, I mean, this is just, I was sort of slightly blown away, especially when you showed me how easy it was to use. And I was actually able to get Chatbase, which was the first Gen AI piece that we introduced into StratNavApp. I was able to get it up and running and into production on the tool, I'm going to say in under 30 minutes.
Really?
Which was
Well,
really staggering.
listen. Let's just discuss what Chatbase is.
So I mean, it's really simple. It's one of these chatbot type of interfaces. When you go to a website and it says click here to chat, and historically they'd always been awful.
They
Basically, it
were
was
always rubbish.
yeah,
Always
they
rubbish.
were always rubbish. That's right. It was the thing you had to trick into connecting you to a real person, right? Because the
Yeah.
chatbot was
Let me
rubbish.
talk to a human. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and eventually, if you manage to get through to a person, you might get an answer. But of course, with Gen AI, the ability of these things to actually provide meaningful responses just went up enormously. And the way it worked for us, certainly, we had for our product, we had quite an extensive set of essentially blog posts, articles, web pages, which described to people exactly what the product did, and more importantly, how to use it to get the benefits that you wanted. And we'd embedded these things, links to these things throughout the tool. The problem is people just don't like to read
Yeah,
too
I mean
much
that.
anymore.
I've been working in IT for many years, 5 years perhaps, and when I was back at Ernst Young back in the day, and we were launching products, and people used to write reams and reams of help documents. They were just documents that were written to be ignored. They were documents to have somebody tick a box as though it's the help, but
Exactly.
nobody used them.
Yeah, it's more like a compliance thing. So
Yes.
if someone, so someone complains, and I remember in IT, the old retort was RTFM, right? I won't say what that stands for because I think this should be a family show. But the retort was, well, you should have read the manual. But if no one wants to spend hours and hours reading.
Probably poorly written anyway.
Well, possibly.
Not yours.
I thought our stuff was really well written, Hugh, but you can make up your own mind about that. So what Chatbase allowed us to do was effectively you pointed the tool at your library of documentation, and it could either be on a website or you could upload it. And in our case, it was on a website already, but you could upload it. And basically, it just ingests all of this information and brings that into a chatbot environment. So someone would be in our tool, and there would be something, a field or a button on a screen, and they would say, what does this mean? And it would come back and give them the exact answer to that question. They didn't have to go and read and find it. It would just come back with the answer. So they could say, what does this mean? How do I do this? Where do I
Yeah,
find
I
this?
mean, yeah.
Why is this
So
important?
it can ingest all your documents up to,
Yeah,
I don't know how many gigabytes, but a lot,
yeah, a lot. Yeah,
a lot. I mean, more than we'll ever need. And it that's all your help system and your FAQs. And I mean, I just think that is such an easy no-brainer. We start here is going to cost you either £0 or £1, just hardly
yeah.
anything. But it's like,
Yeah. The minute you showed me, I was like, well, this is a no-brainer. It was like, is it really going to work? But assuming it does, it's a no-brainer. And I did it, and it really worked. And it had. I mean, interestingly, it had two really phenomenal benefits. And the first one is, for me, was the kind of obvious one. The reason why I thought this is a great idea, and that is that all of a sudden people will get the answers to their questions without having to read a lot, or without having to email support and say, hey, can you help me? Because obviously that's time consuming. But by the way, one of the things that we did build into it is very clear instructions that if it couldn't find a clear answer to the question, it had to say, I'm sorry, we can't
give any
answer this, please
nonsense.
contact support. And so, we didn't get rid of support altogether, but the number of people emailing support dropped
Did it? Did it
dramatically.
really?
Yeah, because people are getting
Noticeably.
people they wanted.
What kind of percentage fall off in email requests for support do you think it
I
generated?
would I would say at best we were getting 2 for every 10 that we would previously have got, and
So
they were the ones that
it
helped.
took out 80% of your support work.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I ever analyzed the numbers on it, but
But
that's my
let's just, let's not try to exaggerate. Let's just stay conservative. At a conservative estimate, it halved for what you're saying is that
at a conservative estimate. It halved. Yeah, that's probably fair to say. It's probably also fair to say that people asked questions and got answers where they wouldn't have bothered. So someone would
right,
have
right, right, right.
run into difficulty, say, I don't know how to do this, and would either have given up or just done the wrong thing and then not got the answer and then
So I
been
mean,
frustrated.
just to pause you there. So in my space, we talk about automating existing process. But this is also process improvement. So not only, it might have automated a process where actually they, might have got the same answer by talking to, but actually process improvement, they're actually getting a better service. Well, just many times better service.
They're getting a much better service. Well,
It's
and it's
quicker.
quicker as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Obviously,
yeah, yeah, of course,
if
yeah.
they've got to email support, then someone in support has got to read the email and do the answer. And we're not running sort of 24/7 support here either. So if you happen to
Mm-hmm.
email when there's no one available to answer, you're waiting for the next day.
But
Whereas now you're getting your
it is
answer immediately.
it is a bit like when you know I first came across ChatGPT, back in, was it November 2022, and just typing in that, oh my God, this is amazing. And I think in some sense, the sort of, and by the way, there are other products available. So, but Chatbase is a
Yeah,
great product, but
yeah,
I mean, you could do the same thing in ChatGPT and Google Gemini and whatever, lots of other ways, lots of similar services. But it's almost so good that you don't believe it.
yes,
And so I suppose the first lesson is to encourage people to take that step and just whack up, all the internal, like, quite often people say, let's start with internal HR support.
yeah,
Whack it up there. What have you got to lose? An afternoon's work.
absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what you've got to lose actually, because I mean you're absolutely right. When when ChatGPT first launched and all the other ones, and then things like Chatbase, you did it and you would be sort of blown away. You'd say, well, this is
Mm, mm,
amazing,
mm, mm.
right? We're now 2-3 years down the
3.
track. Yeah, exactly. And I'm not sure it is amazing anymore. I think it's
Well,
now
that
expected.
is really, really true. Actually, I just think that our sort of appetite and our demand for a service changes so quickly.
Our
Um,
expectation,
our expectations,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
We now expect this as a norm. So when you go to a service and you run into trouble and it says email support, and and you think, oh, for heaven's sake, can't you just, there is a solution. There's a better solution to this problem. Why aren't you offering it? And it becomes a source of frustration now.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's like when I go to a poorly designed internet shop, I must be furious when I have to go to a service, an internet service, and they ask me to create a new ID and password. I'm not going to do. I mean, literally, I get few. I've said, why can't I sign in with my Google ID? I'm not gonna use this service. It really makes me angry. And then, but the same way, I think other people will say, what? Why can't I have a talk to these documents?
Yeah, absolutely. Our expectations move so quickly,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and if you don't keep up, you become a disappointment.
yeah, yeah. I agree. Great.
But Hugh, there was another business benefit which I must admit I hadn't really anticipated, and I probably should have, but it hadn't really been part of my thinking when I'd initially seen it and decided to adopt it. Yeah, and the other business benefit is, um, Chatbase allows you to see the questions your users are asking and the answers your chatbot is giving. And so that actually is a complete game changer, because historically, we're talking StratNavApp, as you know, is a platform for business strategy development and execution. And in that domain, we have a whole way of speaking and language. And so, when we're writing our help text, we're writing it in the way that we understand the problem domain. And of course, what happens is the user comes along, and if they're not well versed in that domain, they maybe use different language or frame it
Different
differently.
words. Yeah, 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 of course.
Different words, yeah. Possibly meaning the same thing, possibly having slightly different nuances. But when you're just providing help text, no matter how good your analytics are, you're still seeing whether they clicked and read what you wrote.
Yeah.
Whereas when you put a chat interface in, you can see what they wrote, the words that they used, the way they were thinking about it, which is a complete game changer. Secondly, you can see the answers that Chatbase is giving. So I would review this quite often, and I'd say, okay, that's a perfectly sensible question. No, that's a disappointing answer. And so now what you have to do is you have to go back to the articles that you've written, that it's ingested, and say it's clearly not clear enough. It's not articulating what we wanted the user to understand clearly enough. So we can tidy it up. So and it's very granular, right? If you're doing just normal sort of web analytics, you can say, well, this article was more, people stayed on this article for longer than they stayed on this article. This one was more popular than that one. But you can't really tell at any level of granularity what they were engaging with or not. So now you're getting direct feedback, and you can be constantly tweaking your content, your responses to the answer, based on. I guess it is real user feedback. I mean, it's not given as feedback, but it is real user feedback. And what's quite interesting is then the mantra was always right for the user, and I think the mantra has now changed to it is still right for the user, but it's also right for the AI.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. I
so
see.
as you're
That's very
writing, you're
interesting.
thinking, is an AI going to interpret this and contextualize this in the right way? And people are now starting to talk about what are good ways to write that makes it easier for AI to
It's interesting.
to apply that. And it's not necessarily how you'd write for a person. I mean, I think you can write in a way that covers both, but there's slightly different considerations.
Well, we could talk about that for a long time, and also this is not an hour-long commercial for Chatbase. So,
No, of course not.
so, so anyway, but so that kind of got you working. You thought, oh my God, this is great, this stuff.
This is
I mean,
great. Yeah,
by the way, just to take out, let's say, 50% of your support calls is amazing. That's brilliant.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So let's go on to, so then you thought, oh, I'll go and put it into some other parts of the tool.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I'm presenting this as a sequence. I mean, I think it was more a rolling evolution of thought, because we were looking at the same time at how you use the ChatGPT APIs, and at the time we were doing it, I think. I did some research. I think ChatGPT at that time was the only one that offers APIs. Obviously, I think most of them offers APIs now. And so, in the simplest sense, the API allows you to take the prompt that you would have typed into the ChatGPT interface, allows you to take that, send it from your computer to ChatGPT, and then you get the response back, right? And so at the simplest level, it means you can have a computer generate the prompt, right? And then you can have a computer get the prompt back. And so started playing around with that and saying, how do we use this to take information from the system? So I don't know, that's a system like any others. People are putting data into it, whether they're entering it or whether it's coming in through the APIs, or whether it's gathering the data that makes up your strategy. So we could take that data out of our repository put it into the prompt, send the prompt to ChatGPT and say, do something with this information, whatever it is that we wanted to do. And, that's great. But the game changer was, so normally you send your prompt to ChatGPT and it sends back some paragraphs of text, maybe with bullets, right? And it's designed to be read like any other text by a human. But because it's a computer, you can just as easily tell it to send back the text in a format that is structured data for a computer to use.
Right,
Right.
like I think JSON format is
So
what.
the method we use, and I think probably the method everyone uses, there may be alternatives, but the method we use is it comes back as a JSON object.
So that's JavaScript notation. Anyway, whatever. Anyway,
It's a
it's a
kind of Java.
structured.
It's the format that computer programs use for passing information between each other, rather than for passing information to people to consume. And so what that means is instead of saying here's the answer that ChatGPT gave us, you can now read that, Mr. User. We can take that information and put it into a user interface, which the user, so it can be interpreted as buttons or edit fields or drag and drop components that they can interact with. So you're not just reading it, you're processing it through the user interface. And that opened up a huge amount of capabilities. It's interesting, when we first did it, we said, oh, we can take this information, we can give it a piece of text, maybe the minutes of a meeting, and we can say, extract all the strategic insights or extract all the actions or search through this text and find any references to competitors and then extract what was said about those competitors. So, you can ask the prompt to do things like that with the information that you feed it. And at first we said, well, this is great. So we send the text, it extracts the information, and we can pump it straight back into our repository. And, the interesting thing was we immediately discovered that was a really bad idea, because you had to put the human back into the loop. So it had to come back and say, here's some stuff that I found that may be of interest. You then had to have a human engage with it. Otherwise, you end up with a strategy, a business strategy that no human has seen. And of course, that's never going to get executed, right? You have to, strategy is a social engaged process. So we have to get the human back in the loop.
But obviously you mentioned using the API and getting JSON back. But I mean, so within some of the tools within StratNavApp, like your SWOT analysis, so it then you're sending it all the information that you have about the company, and then you're getting it back to say, oh, these might be your strengths, or these might be your weaknesses. So you're getting rid of the tyranny of the blank page. You're saying,
Yes.
so, oh, look, here are 5 things to think about, and they're relevant 5 things because they've used information from within all the information that you have about that company, and then you're bundling it together in a sensible package of information to ask an external AI to look. What do you reckon? What's your thought? It comes back. It doesn't give the right answer, but it gives something. I hadn't thought about that, and
Yeah. I mean, I quickly discovered. So we went again through a number of iterations of this, but to your point, I quickly discovered that typically, if it came back with 10 things, 8 of them you would have said, well, that's fairly obvious.
Mm.
One of them you would say, no, I just disagree. I think that's wrong, and then you dismiss it. And it's always the last one that you would say, that's really interesting. I've never really thought about it like that.
So,
And it's that one that's worth it, right?
yeah, no, but also the 8, by the way, the 8 obvious ones, just, at least it stops you having to type. They're there.
Yes.
We would have got them anyway, which is good.
But the other iteration that we went through, so the first couple of things that we tried, the ones that were easy, so you could just go to ChatGPT and you could say, look, here's the company, here's the industry that it operates in. What do you think are the major trends? So we would do like a pestle analysis. So we'd say, tell us, what do you think are the major
Pestle,
trends?
remind me what a pestle is.
So the pestle is a framework. It stands for political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal.
Right.
So it's kind of, it's a checklist, and when you're looking at a company, you'd say, well, go through all of
In all
these and
those
say,
categories. Right.
can we identify any trends, threats, or opportunities in any of those categories that this organization needs to worry about? So if you could say, here's the organization, industry it operates in, effectively do the pestle analysis for us, it could go to its pre-trained knowledge and actually do a fairly good starting point for a pestle analysis.
Mm. Mm.
And we could do the same thing with a competitor analysis, provided it was an established industry with established competitors. Obviously, if it's a very niche startup thing, it didn't work so well. But provided it was an established industry with established competitors, we could say to it, can you list the competitors? Can you categorize them into the major categories of competitors? And can you compare them in terms of their relative strengths or weaknesses compared to the, and so it could do that from its own general knowledge, and the prompts that
Yeah.
you would
So
need to
it's
do.
not. It's not. It's so the knowledge that it's referencing is knowledge that has been ingested into the Chat GPT model. It's not going out and doing more research on the internet, is it?
No.
No.
So
Okay. So
that was the first iteration, right? And that was great. Obviously, it had its limitations because it would tell you the known knowns, if you like. The second two iterations, well, let's rather combine them, is that you could then bring your own information that you'd sourced from reports, internal stuff, and you could feed that to the AI and ask it to analyze and interpret it.
right. So well, I just want to let's just go back time a bit. When you weren't doing this, but you were just getting rid of the tyranny of the blank page, and you were, getting the AI to generate the first iteration of a strength or a weakness or an opportunity, what was the feedback from users like? What did they say? Oh, this is great. Or did they say, oh, too much? Or
No. Well, I think initially that there's the first that's sort of blown away,
right, yeah.
as in, how did
Wow.
that happen? This
Yeah,
is
have they been listening to me?
yeah. Is this magic? Did you cheat somehow? Right?
Yeah.
Did you pre-prepare this example and
Yes.
cheat somehow? And then so once I think people have got over that initial thing now because the stuff's been around for long enough. So once they did it, they are they find it enormously useful because it just saves so much time in getting the stuff up and running. And remember that the strategy process that we have builds, it's a sort of multi-step process. So you want to be laying the groundwork so that you can build successive layers until you get to the really insightful stuff. So it massively shortens that groundwork laying stage.
I bet.
And as I said, there's always something that it comes out with that people said, that's really interesting. I never really thought about that. And that, that's what gets the thinking going. So, and it's been enormously well received. But the next iteration was more about when you start feeding in information about, and this is more from your own research or third party research, but more current. So you add it in. And so, the first prompt, tell us what you think the competitors are. So you take you take Tesco's and you say, well, Tesco's is a supermarket in the UK. So now you've identified its industry, and you say, what are the competitors? So now that's like a 3-line prompt, and then you say, what are the competitors? And it comes back with a list of 20 competitors categorized by various categories for you. But it's really still only a 3-line prompt, right? Much like your average hack would use when they on ChatGPT and asking it simple little questions. But if you feed a lot of information in, your prompts start to grow. And this is where our system is collecting the data about your business and your industry in its structured repository. And then it uses that to construct a prompt with a lot of context. And you'll hear people, 2 years ago, everyone was talking about the importance of prompt engineering. You're now starting to hear people talking about the importance of context engineering, because the more context you give the system, and you can say, you're now no longer saying, analyze the information that's available to the general public, Library of Congress type of thing. You're now saying, analyze and process this unique information that only we have that relates specifically to our business and our strategy. So it's able to, instead of coming up with sort of generic analysis, it's able to come up with much more specific. And of course, when you're doing strategy, it's about, specificity matters a lot. You're trying
You're doing
you're trying to
strategy
come
for
up.
your company, not anybody else's.
Exactly. You don't want to come up with sort of a magnolia strategy, right? I mean, you've seen them all. Our strategy is to be the best in our industry, and you say, I mean, that's
Okay, great.
that doesn't. You want something that's really specific and tailored to your industry, your business, and your insight, and so you can do that. And the interesting thing that we found in doing that, so as I said, the first prompts tell us Tesco's competitors, 2-3 lines long. The prompts just started growing. So prompts are measured in tokens, which are about 1.5. I think every word is about 1.5 tokens on average. So just to give you a sense. And so we went quite quickly from sort of 1-200 token prompts to several thousands. And of course, as we were developing, the AI engines were enlarging the
Better, yeah.
the context window, the prompt size that you could feed it. So I think Chat GPT now allows up to 1 million tokens, but we are routinely generating in the hundreds of thousands of token prompts. Yeah, hundreds of thousands of tokens in a single prompt.
So you might have 100,000 tokens in one prompt.
Yes.
Wow. I didn't know
So
that.
so essentially, it's got, as we're trying to get as close to having the prompt context include the sum total of your knowledge of your business, your industry, and your strategy. Okay, because the closer we can get to the sum total of it, the closer we can get to answers that you
That
can't
are
beat.
relevant, and yeah, of course.
And also can't be beaten. So the traditional thing is you can't do strategy with computers. You have to have it with people because people have the insight, right? But the closer you get to have all that information, you say, well, all of the insight resides in that information. Whether we'll ever get there or whether people will always have the edge, I mean, that's a philosophical debate. But we'll get closer. It'll get more and more useful.
Yeah, but from your tool, which I think is great, but your tool will ingest more and more information of a company's strategy. And at one stage, the amount of information that it has will be more than any one person can be bothered to read or ingest or master. And if it's running over 10 years, then there might be lots of people who've come in and out of different positions. And actually, I mean, that's very powerful.
Yeah.
It's very powerful.
The insight, and again, our philosophy has always been human in the loop, but the insight, the analysis and insight the machine is able to draw out of the information just gets better and better and better, and gives the human in the loop more to work with. Right?
Amazing. Yeah.
It's ask us in a couple of months' time. I reckon we'll be doubling that sort of
1,000 tokens. Wow.
Yeah.
Why not? I mean, it's not very expensive.
I mean, there is a cost. There is a cost. Yeah, it isn't free. Obviously, the more tokens you send each time, the more expensive it gets. But it's a value exchange, right? The value goes up.
It's definitely cheaper than people, and people are very expensive.
It's cheaper and faster than people. So it means that when you're sitting and thinking about your strategy, it's the pace at which you can think is the limiting factor, not the analytics anymore.
Yeah, brilliant. I love it.
I don't want to overstate it. I'm not saying it. I'm not saying you just press a button and it solves all your problem. There's still a thought process as you go through. As I said, it's a multi-layered approach, a multi-stage approach of going through the analysis.
Well, I always think a bit like, I don't like automatic cars because I like flipping the car into neutral and freewheeling. That's the one
Yeah.
I like to
Right.
drive. But the thing is, an automatic gearbox is bloody good, but it can't see. Well, at the moment, it can't see what I'm seeing. It can't see that
Yeah.
there's a traffic light up there
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
30 meters, which has already just gone red.
Yeah.
It can't see that. I can see that. And so one assumes that the human is going to have, more insight or more, readily available insight than you have. Mind you, I mean, the question is, they might have new insight. Do they have the depth? You've got the historical depth that they don't have. Anyway, there we go.
Yeah, but I think that driving example is a great example. So at the moment, your automatic car doesn't know that you're
Mm,
approaching a corner or you're about to overtake, and therefore it should gear down.
mm,
It
mm,
doesn't know that.
mm,
But it's not inconceivable that at some point in the future it will know that.
mm. It's entirely conceivable. It's like,
Yeah.
it's
And,
just,
it's the same thing. So our software and our AI is not going to know everything, but the amount of support it can give you to effectively drive your car more the way you want is increasing.
yeah,
And we'll, the old saying about AI, this is the worst it's ever going to be. And it's the same with the AI in our product.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
worst it's ever going to be.
But let's move on to that other thing that I just thought. I mean, I know it's kind of obvious, but I just thought, wow. I just thought, wow.
There's two more steps to this. So we ended up with a problem then, actually, because now we had two different modes of AI built into the system. So remember, we still got chat base where you can say, how do I do this? And what does this mean on the screen? And you can ask it questions. And then we had the AI where you could say, like, help me find the competitors for this thing. For me, it was obvious that there were two different things, and how could you ever confuse them? But it was evident that the users were getting confused about. So they would go to the chat base that was trained on the user manuals effectively, and they would ask it to find the competitors. And of course, chat base didn't have all that context. And by the same token, if you asked the one that had all the context, that didn't have the user manual. So that was less of an issue. The issue was more that
Right.
people would go to Chatbase and ask it a question about their strategy, and Chatbase would always come back and say, well, I don't know anything about that. That's not in my training. It's only trained on the...
So you really wanted to expose chat-based to all the information that you contained about that particular company.
Well, so we did it the other way around, right? So what we did is we took all of that same help text, which has now been improved through our relationship with Chatbase, and we loaded it as don't want to get too much into technology, but we loaded it as a vector database into the ChatGPT API.
Right. Okay. So you vectorized the whole of all your help files and all the conversations, and then you expose that to ChatGPT, and then you just changed the interface for the conversation for the help bot to ChatGPT.
So then we built effectively we built...
Right. But it is using ChatGPT now.
Yeah. So it's our own front end, and the back end is now ChatGPT, as opposed to
but
the
talking
chat-based
to a
front end.
vectorized version of all the data that you've contained about.
Talking to both the vectorized version of all of the help data and the full context prompt of all of your strategy data.
Right. That's
So
very interesting.
now in a single chat, you can ask, what does this mean on the screen, or how do I do this in the tool? And it can answer it. And you can say, what are the competitors? And it can answer it.
But does that mean, just to get very technical, does that mean within each conversation you have, because obviously you're putting a wall between users of you're not sharing information from one company to another. So you take all the information that you have about, let's say you're working for Tesco, so the whole Tesco strategy, and then you input the whole of that into one prompt, even if they say, so that's just as context into one prompt. So you get a massive amount of context, and then the first thing is, where's the print button? But they still have that massive amount of context. So for each API call, you have a massive, great big sort of a huge swollen abdomen of context and a tiny
Yes.
little, yeah, where's the print button? But each time you still give it all that context.
So you're absolutely right. There's a hidden cost to it. But I guess the advantage is, when you phone a call center and you say, I want to change my address, and they say, fine, I can change my address. And then they say, now can I check the balance on my account? And the person says, well, I can't do that. I'm going to have to transfer you. And then the call gets dropped.
Well, I mean, you just came back to the frustration of customer service, which we talked about. I mean, we sort of alluded to where the original chatbots were rubbish, and then actually, I think call centers are pretty good now, but still, sometimes they're found wanting. But NHS, I think, is a better thing where you go and they say, "What's your address?" and you get to the next person. Well, could you fill in this? I've just done that,
Yeah.
But anyway, you're getting over that by let's call it the
Yeah, and it's
swollen abdomen of
yeah, and it's slightly brute force. It would be nice if there was a way to like sort of pre-process the prompt and say, do we need to send the entire strategy to answer where's the print button? But at the moment, that's the only way we can do it. And the truth of the matter is, we tried. It didn't matter how much we tried. We just couldn't get users to understand that chat interface had this set of information and this interface had that set of information. Well, people, I kind of get it from the user's perspective. They say,
they don't care. Why should they
that's
care?
not my problem.
Yeah,
That's not my. I've got a question. Can you answer it? It did also mean.
And by the way, what they're saying is, I've got a question, and you should know the answer because you should know me. That's what they're saying. What they're really saying is, you should know my context.
You should
That's
know
what
my
they're saying.
context. That's right. Yeah. And don't make your data partitions my problem.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's funny that context is just becoming the thing, isn't it? The thing. Anyway, let's say.
So that led to a next interesting problem, right? Because now you can go and you can type in. So you go into this chat window and you say, well, tell me what my competitors are, and now it comes back with a chat answer, and you're back to free-form text. So we then had to find a way of blending and saying, if the answer that you're giving looks something like the sort of structured data that the system knows how to interpret, then put that in a JSON object. But if it just looks like free-form response, then just provide that as a free-form response. So you've got to find a way of blending those two things. I don't know. That's kind of hard to explain, right? But you're now letting the user type in a free-form question because you don't know whether they're going to ask where's the print button or what are Tesco's competitors. You don't know which question they're going to ask. It's a free-form thing, but you don't want the answer necessarily to be a free-form answer because then you're back to, well, now you've got some text that you can read, and if you want to do anything with it, you've got to copy and paste it somewhere, and of course that's not a good outcome for the customer as well. So the machine has got to discern between whether this is an answer to a question that you want to just present in free form, or whether it's a structured answer that the system needs to know how to process. Free form versus JSON, effectively, and that takes a bit of cunning prompt engineering, but is possible. So we've now got it where it can discern between the type of answer it's giving and what we want the user to be able to do with that answer. And so that's and this is we're now we're now at the sort of cutting edge of what we're doing in StratNavApp, stuff that's only on limited release still, because it's still fairly experimental. But that took us to the last step, which we're just starting to work on, where we worked out that now that you have so much context available, you have all of that context available, plus all of the understanding about what the system is trying to help the user to do. So you have those two together. Now you can flip the conversation. So now you can go to the AI and say, here's everything we know about this organization strategy. There's everything that we know about StratNavApp and what it's trying to do. What is the next question you would ask the user about? So it can then go away and it can come back and say, well, the information that we don't really have is we don't really know what customer segment X's jobs to be done are, because that information isn't in the context. But the model says that would be helpful because it would allow us to do these things, and we can see that's what you're trying to do. So it can then go and say, here's the information that we most want. The user can then type it in free form text, like it's in a chat interface. It can then take that answer and say, okay, I see that this is either unstructured answer that we can only comment on in an unstructured way, or I can see actually that's a jobs to be done, which we can then extract from your answer, present back to you as the human in the loop, saying it looks like you're saying the job to be done for this customer segment is X. Do you want to add that into your strategy?
Just one second too. So you're saying that it proactively says, I think you missed this. And if it does say that, so when does it do it? Does it do it after a meeting or after you've done a certain exercise? When does it come back and say?
At the moment, the simple version of it that we're working on is at some point you click a button and say, guide me. So you do have to engage it.
Right.
And the question is very slightly different. It's not what's missing. It's what would be most useful.
Very subtle.
Because it might look at it and say, well, we don't know what the jobs to be done for customer segment X are, but actually I can see what your problem is really to do with supply chain. So that's probably not the most useful thing. Probably something around your supply chain analysis is going to be the next most useful thing. I mean, eventually it'll get round to that if you keep going, but probably you'd stop once you felt you'd solved your problems. And knowing what the jobs to be done may not be the most relevant thing to your thing. Now, as I said, this is really experimental. So, we have to wait and see how good is it really at doing that. But you can imagine if you can get it to work, you sort of flip the conversation and the AI becomes the consultant interviewing the client, taking the client's answers, interpreting for them, building the context, and then continuing with the interview, which is, that's my job as a consultant, right? I interview the clients, they answer my questions. I think about the answers. I feed the answers into the context
the great
of everything I've
context that
learned
you
so
have,
far.
the
I'm the
20
context
years.
engine. Now you can imagine the AI being the context engine and flipping those questions. Now, whether you give that directly to the client or whether I sit as an intermediary between the system and that's obviously a choice that each consultant could make.
Brilliant. Anyway, let's move on because I think that's fantastic. But also, I mean, the wow thing that I thought about was so kind of obvious, but I just thought that really saves a lot of time. And it was, I mean, I do think it was very good, but I'm going to say what it is and then you can comment on it because, so you and I had a conversation and then you sent me the minutes of that conversation. And I thought those minutes are really very good. They're really very accurate, included a whole load of action points plus suggested dates by which I do the actions. And I just went back. I mean, I didn't realize that it was coming through your engine. And the reason you said it was good was it had a whole lot of context about us. I thought, right, okay, that really works. And I just thought, if you have that with every kind of board meeting, it's going to save an hour of very expensive time because you're going to knock those minutes out in minutes rather than. And when I was at KPMG, it always took me, and a half-hour meeting would take 40 hours of writing my notes up. And I like the AI stuff that does meeting summarizations. This was just better, and it's just better because it's got context.
So I mean, as a consultant, I do effectively three things, right? I interview the stakeholders at the client, and I ask them questions. I take the answers. I think about the answers, and I redirect. And I have an interview process of trying to get the strategic insight. So that's part of it. The other part of it I do is I do primary or secondary research, right? So documents or research that I'm reading, and I feed that back into the context that then goes into the conversations or workshops or whatever we're doing. And then, of course, the last bit is I feed back my findings to the client. But if we take those first bits, and particularly the interviews or workshops, right? And this is where I said you want information that's not in the public domain to feed into the context, because that's where you get the real insight. So a lot of my job as a consultant is doing those interviews, and then, as you say, there's a lot of work afterwards to make sure you've extracted all of the insight. And
by the way, I think that's the same with most professionals. My
probably.
sister-in-law is a psychologist, and it's an hour talking to a client and an hour writing up the notes.
Yeah. So no, that's exactly right. So, if I've got 10 executives to interview, I interview the first one. The system's then helping me extract all that insight and capturing it within the strategic frameworks. So it has a combination of the context that the stakeholder has, plus the process context that the system has that it knows from the user manuals, if you like. So it knows the kind of things we're trying to achieve. It extracts the relevant stuff from that stakeholder interview, feeds it into the model, and then when I do the second stakeholder interview, and it's now analyzing that, it already has the context from the first stakeholder interview, if you like. And so by the time you've got to the 8th, 9th, and 10th stakeholder interviews and done all the other work that you're doing in between, its ability to discern what's relevant and insightful and new is really phenomenal. And that's why you get that really high quality output. So I know if I go to a standard meeting transcription service or summarization service, whenever I say StratNavApp, it spells it wrong. Right? Because it doesn't know what I'm talking about, right? Whenever my one does it, it always knows, right? Because when you're talking about the organization and its competitors and its stakeholders and all of that kind of stuff, it has all of that information. So when you say Hugh Abbott, it knows it's with 2 B's and 2 T's, right? Because the first time it might get it wrong, and then the human in the loop, you correct it. But after that, it always knows that when you say Hugh Abbott, you mean with 2 B's and 2 T's. And when someone talks about, and what happens with most conversations, you start off and the cat walks across the screen, and so you start talking about the guy's cat, you're building rapport and all of that kind of stuff. But the system knows that that's not important to the conversation you're having about an insurance company.
Brilliant.
So that kind of gets glossed over. And, it says that this is not strategically relevant. There you go.
You're not strategically relevant. Get out of the picture.
Not to this conversation, Hugh. I'm not going to comment about the rest of your life.
Well, look, let's just summarize. Or can I summarize and you tell me? So we started off using chat-based, which is basically ingesting all your help documents into a chat service. And guess what? It's 100 times better than the old chat services used to be, but 100 times better. But I mean, what was it? You were using the free version. I presume you started with the free version, then went to the paid
I started
version.
with the free version. I mean, I do pay for it, but I mean, really, it's like cheap as chips.
Yeah. Okay, so that's like no brainer. Just do that. Then the next step was to start using the API to generate bits of suggested bits of text to get over the blank page, the tyranny of the blank page.
Text categorization as well. So it's not only
the categorization. Yeah. And then as you became more expert with the API, you just started bunging a whole load of context at everything, which I presume is just a revolution in sort of accuracy and.
I mean, it was a bit more thought through than just bunging a whole lot in, but yes.
Sorry. I'm reducing your expertise to the word bung. Sorry.
It's okay.
Bung. Yeah. And then that turbocharges the insight given back. And the more you put at it, the better you get. I completely agree with about the context. And then you use context to help generate really relevant notes from meetings. I just think it's such a great time saver. I think it's
I
all
would,
brilliant. I love it.
as a practicing consultant myself, if we could get to the point where all I do is have the personal interaction with the client, right? So I have the meeting, and the art of consulting is drawing the right kind of information out of the client as well as out of the documents. But let's focus on the client for now. The art of consulting is drawing the right kind of information, framing things in a way that you get the insight out of those conversations. So if I could get to the point where I am doing the client contact and the AI is doing all the outside of the meeting grunt work that you were talking about, relieving that burden so that I can focus on the client interaction part. That for me would be a fantastic result. Make the machine do everything the machine can do so that the people can do the bit that's really
But I mean,
personal.
but you are also saying, coming sort of full circle, that if they're using it, the platform without you, that's it. You just you're just reducing the amount of work, and by the way, this is knowledge work, so you're reducing the amount of knowledge work substantially. I mean, if I think of the order of 50%. You said to me that the number of help requests to reduce of the order of 50%. I think a tool like yours could definitely reduce the amount of work that those people needed to do on their strategy by 50%.
I know.
And they're bloody expensive people. They're the
Oh, they
most
are
expensive
expensive
people.
people. Yeah. They're very expensive people. I know you always challenge me on this, right? To
I
try
do.
and quantify the amount of time. And I know why you're doing it, and I get like the challenge, but I always struggle with it because yes, it is more efficient, but what I find harder to quantify is the way in which it's better.
Yes.
So
But you do and you don't. I mean, you said to me in the beginning when we talked about that that the help file, using the chat bot instead of help files. You said actually it's a lot better than talking to a human because I get an instantaneous response.
yeah, yeah. And that for me is hard to quantify. How much is that worth? I don't know. I mean, to me, it's worth a lot. But it's harder to quantify than how many fewer people come through to support at StratNavApp.com.
Yes.
That I probably could quantify. I didn't. I probably could have. But how much better it is the hard part to quantify.
Brilliant.
And
Well,
maybe we
I
don't need
think
to. Maybe the saving in terms of the amount of calls not coming through, maybe that's enough to make the cost benefit case. Maybe we don't need to worry.
no, I definitely think it. Well, we know because it costs you zero or costs you half an hour in your first instance. So we know the cost benefit is good, but also I think what you sort of said at the beginning is our expectations, as consumers of this kind of stuff. I mean, it's ridiculous. How quickly we've got used to it, and how quickly we assume that when I speak to my Alexa now and I ask it a question it doesn't understand, I just think this is rubbish.
This is rubbish.
Yeah, I just think it's absolute rubbish. I just want it to be better. I want it to be as good as ChatGPT.
Yeah. I mean, I have a theory about. So, if you distinguish between ChatGPT and OpenAI, I have a theory about ChatGPT. I'm not sure if this is true. I'm going to put it out there just to see what you think, right? So I think the guys at OpenAI were busy working on this LLM solution that they were building. And I suspect they were all nervous because they were all saying, other people are working on it too. And the first to go public is going to get a lot of attention, and that's a massive advantage. And I have a feeling they sat there and said, if we just go out and explain to people that we've uncovered this amazing capability, it'll go in all the scientific publications and all the other nerds will look at it, and no one will care. But if we can build a consumer interface, the chat GPT interface where you go and type in something and
Hello.
it gives it, the thing where you go to, write me a poem about HR in the voice of Dr. Seuss, right? If we can come up with something like that, we can demo it, and that'll get a lot of attention. And it worked brilliantly, right? They demoed it and got a lot of attention. But I think honestly, the ChatGPT thing was like an attention-getting gimmick, and what they really meant is for us to do all of these other things with it.
Well, I think there's a bit of hindsightism. I mean, you got to remember that well, first of all, the technology that OpenAI was using is open source Google technology. They just happened to perfect it. But the truth of the matter is, and this kind of, I suppose, is relevant, is that people have talked about AI for so long. Everybody gone to sleep. Talking about AI, that was supposed to be delivered in the year 2000, wasn't it? I've gone to sleep. Not interested anymore. It's because they'll just be talking about it and they'll never deliver it. And they did deliver it. They did deliver it on the 30th of November 2022, which is when they released ChatGPT, 3 or 3.5, I can't remember. Anyway, that's when they released it, and oh wow! And then now we're all playing catch up. Well, how can we use it? How can we use this thing to its greatest extent? I think you've used it brilliantly, because I'm sure that, well, and you'll say, well, I don't know how to quantify this. It's changed your service and made it better by, we don't know how much X% has made it better by, but you got to kind of think, is that really 35% better? Got to be,
No,
got to be somewhere like that.
I think that's the wrong metric. I don't think it's 35% better. I think it's like 5 or 10 times better. If you just take even that meeting ingestion thing, right? The ability for me to interview a stakeholder at a client about their strategy and have all that information ingested, processed, put into the repository and used.
Because I think that the truth of the matter is that, within a lot of companies, within a lot of projects, we people who work on projects generate a whole load of stuff, and that whole load of stuff gets very quickly forgotten, unused. It's in a file system. It's on the P drive. Oh, it's in the folder on the P drive, and nobody knows it's there, completely forgotten. But actually, this is completely usable information, which is, Microsoft used the word surface. It's surfaced. I mean, that is, I'm glad you.
In fact, one of the challenges that we have at the moment, somewhere on the roadmap, we're going to have to address this, is if you're not careful, it surfaces almost too much stuff. And because of the way strategy processes work, stuff that it surfaces at the beginning, you might want to bury again. I mean, I'm extending the analogy too much, right? But stuff that seemed important, that the AI highlighted as important, which at the time it correctly highlighted as important, which is now no longer quite as relevant. It needs a way to kind of push it into the background and say
it's a way to forget, which is quite funny, because I remember listening to some psychologists talking about the utility of forgetting. I mean, not very good at remembering, so it doesn't seem to me that
that's right.
Forgetting is very good. But people who remember too much, everything's there. But there is a utility in forgetting, which is a very interesting point. But I suppose that's for another conversation.
Yeah, and you don't necessarily want it to forget it. You just want it to realize
it's less important.
It's not as relevant as it initially appeared, because other things are now relatively more relevant.
And you really need an AI solution to be able to work out that nuance, rather than have everything of the same priority. No, that's what. Anyway, there we go. Look, I think that I really enjoyed that conversation. That was brilliant.
That was great fun.
And I love the fact that I said to you right at the end, "Oh, do you think it's increased 35%?" You said no, fivefold. Well, that's good.
Yeah,
that'll do for me.
Yeah,
that'll do for me.
Yeah, brilliant.
Okay.
Thanks, you.
I'll look for the edited highlights of this. All right. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Perfect. Cheers.
Bye bye.